As the American Revolution in the northern colonies turned into a stalemate, the British turned their focus to the southern colonies, believing that conquering the South would cripple the Americans' military fighting capabilities and economy. On November 26, 1778, British Secretary of State for the American Department, Lord George Germain, ordered Lieutenant Colonel Archibald Campbell to invade Georgia from New York, with around 3,000 British regulars from the 71st Highlanders, Loyalists, and Hessian troops, where they aimed to win the war by taking over the southern colonies with the assistance of local Loyalists, and General Augustine Prevost also received orders to invade Georgia from Florida. On December 29, 1778, Campbell captured Savannah, and Augustine Prevost arrived in Savannah on January 1779, taking command of all British forces. Nearly a month later, on January 31, 1779, Campbell and his regulars marched up the Savannah River to attack Augusta. Upon hearing reports of Campbell's advance, Patriot forces abandoned the city, allowing Campbell and his army to claim the city uncontested. Campbell now focused on Georgia's backcountry, spreading his forces thin. As a result, Campbell dispatched Colonel Boyd north to raise loyalists throughout the Carolinas to augment the British ranks. Successful in his task, Boyd was returning, but on the morning of February 14th, Boyd and his regiment were ambushed at Kettle Creek. Meanwhile, Campbell had already abandoned Augusta earlier that morning due to Patriot forces gathering in the area and was chased by General John Ashe. While retreating, Campbell burned Freeman's Bridge after crossing it. On February 20th, he transferred his command to Augustine Prevost's brother, Lieutenant Colonel James Mark Prevost, and returned to Savannah. On February 27th, Patriot General Ashe reached the destroyed bridge across Brier Creek, placed his camp near the ruined structure, ordered its repair, and began constructing a supply road from his camp to Matthews Bluff on the Savannah River. On March 1st, Patriot Major Francis Ross's detachment of horse dragoons was ordered to scout the region as far north as Paris Mill for the rest of the day and that night. On the same day, British forces began a flanking operation at 3 p.m., their destination, Paris Mill. As a result of the success at Kettle Creek and small raids in the backcountry, General Lincoln, commander of the Southern Department, began plans to retake Savannah and called for a war council at Black Swamp, which Ashe attended. Unfortunately for the Patriot forces, Ross and his unit returned the following morning, allowing Mark Prevost's central attacking force to remain undetected as they arrived at Paris Mill around 10 a.m. Later that evening, after the war council, Ashe returned to his camp with orders to defend Brier Creek and wait for Generals Lincoln, Rutherford, and Williams's forces to consolidate at Brier Creek. Once Ashe returned, he discovered the camp had moved north and a picket line established. That same day, despite General Bryan and Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Elbert warning Ashe of possible British forces gathering at Paris Mill, Ashe decided not to send out more scouts, allowing the British to march into attack positions during the night. On the morning of March 3, 1779, General Ashe received scouting dispatches that British forces were on top of them, causing unrest throughout Ashe's camp. At 3:30 p.m., the British drove in American pickets from the north and advanced to Miller Bridge from the south in a pincer movement. The British formed attack positions with the 2nd Battalion from the 71st Fraser Highlanders taking the center. To its right, Baird's light infantry formed, while the left flank consisted of Carolina Loyalists and cavalry. Prevost then set up reserves of East Florida volunteer companies and dragoons, while 50 riflemen guarded Prevost's rear. In response, the Americans, neither on alert nor entrenched, gathered what supplies they could. Elbert advanced his Georgia Continentals to form the center of the American lines, while the New Bern Regiment of North Carolina formed the left flank, and the Edenton Regiment of North Carolina formed the right flank. The Patriots then created a second line behind them, with the Halifax Regiment of North Carolina forming a second line on the left flank, and the Wilmington Regiment of North Carolina forming a second line on the right flank. At the same time, Colonel Archibald Lytle and his North Carolina Light Infantry were sent to Freeman's Bridge as reserves. At 4 p.m., Prevost began the attack with a barrage of cannon fire, inflicting heavy damage on the American front lines, and ordered the British lines to advance. The Patriots responded by opening fire on the advancing British lines before marching to meet the British. As the Patriot front lines advanced, Elbert and his unit drifted in front of the New Bern Regiment, preventing them from firing. At the same time, the Edenton Regiment shifted to the right. Prevost saw this opening in the American formations and commanded the 71st Regiment to exploit the gap and charge with bayonets. Seeing this, Baird led a charge into the American left flank, causing panic in the American formations and resulting in the remaining regiments fleeing from the battlefield. In an attempt to re-establish the American lines, Lytle advanced with his light infantry from Freeman's Bridge, hoping to stop the rout. However, Lytle and his regiment fled after seeing most Patriot lines scattering in multiple directions. At this moment, only Elbert and his Georgia Continentals were left to fight against the 71st Highlanders. Prevost called his reserves into action, which overpowered the remaining American troops as the British reserves cut down the Georgia Regiment, giving the British a decisive victory. The British killed 150 to 200 American soldiers during this conflict and captured another 28 officers, including Elbert and 200 other Patriot soldiers, while the British only suffered 5 deaths and 11 wounded. General Ashe's defeat at Brier Creek was catastrophic and set the Patriots' momentum back by an entire year, and the consequences of the defeat were more evident. The defeat disrupted the Patriots' plan to consolidate their forces at Brier Creek, to retake Savannah and drive British troops out of Georgia, which would protect South Carolina from being invaded the following year. After the Battle of Brier Creek, the British experienced successes for the next year, when they successfully defended Savannah on October 18, 1779, and defeated Patriot forces at Charleston on May 12, 1780, and Camden in South Carolina on August 16, 1780, which further solidified British control in the South and demoralized Patriot forces throughout the southern colonies. As a result of the Battle of Brier Creek and other British victories, the Patriots lost their foothold in Georgia, allowing the British to re-establish their colonial rule from 1779 to 1781.